Change ringing is a procedure for ringing bells in various orders. It involves a group of people rhythmically ringing a set of tuned bells through a series of changing sequences that are determined by mathematical principles and are executed according to learned patterns. In this video, I'm going to tell you what change ringing is and how it works. First, let's look at the structure of the bells. Change ringing is most commonly performed in bell towers that contain 8 to 10 bells. The bells are made from an alloy of copper and tin. They are arranged down the musical scale from the lightest bell, which is called the treble, to the heaviest bell, which is called the tenor. The bells are attached to a wheel and are hung in either a wooden or steel frame. Long strands of rope are attached to the wheel, which when pulled cause the bell to move in a circular rotation. The bells rotate around the center of the wheel, with the clapper in the center striking the inside of the bell. This causes the bell to strike its note. Attached to the frame is a piece of wood called a stay. The stay makes the bell stop in an upright position. The stay keeps the bell from consistently rotating after the ringer pulls on the rope, and it allows the ringer to maintain control over the bell and change the speed of the bell when they are ringing. Now that we know how the bell is structured and how it works, let's look at how change ringing was introduced. In the 1600s, many bell towers in Europe had bells that were mounted on a large wooden wheel which would rotate 360 degrees when rung by the ringer. These towers normally had about 5 bells installed. Around this time, ringers began ringing the bells in a simple pattern. This pattern is known as ringing rounds. In this pattern, the bells are rung one after another from the highest bell to the lowest over and over again. In 1668, Fabian Stedman, also known as the father of change ringing, wrote a book titled The Art of Ringing, which contained multiple methods of ringing bells in different patterns in which the ringers could switch the order of their bells to make a new sound. Thus, change ringing was introduced. So what actually occurs during change ringing? First, the ringers start ringing in rounds. After hearing the command to begin the method, the ringers change the order of the bells to produce a series of distinct sequences known as rows or changes. These changes continue until the bells are in their original order. There are 4 main rules of change ringing. The first rule states that each bell must sound once in each row. This rule states that during each row of any method, each bell is only allowed to sound once. If a bell is to ring more than once during a row, it could confuse the other ringers and could cause the method to fall apart. The second rule states that no bell may move more than one position during each row. This rule states that each bell must switch their position with whatever bell that they are following or are being followed by during each row of a method. Who you change your position with depends on which method is being rung. The third rule states that no rule is to be repeated during the method unless the method is rung more than once. This rule is pretty much self-explanatory. Unless the method is being rung more than once, each row must only be rung once during the method. The final rule states that every method will always begin and end with the ringers ringing in rounds. This rule states that each method begins with the ringers ringing in the order of the smallest bell, or the treble, to the biggest bell, the tenor. There's actually a bell tower here in Marietta, Georgia. This bell tower is located at St. James Episcopal Church off of the Marietta Square. The church tower is home to 8 bells that are swung full circle in the 300-year-old English church. The St. James Guild of Change Ringers currently includes approximately 20 people whose ages range from 11 years old to 70 years old. For the past 6 years, I have been learning to ring bells and to ring different methods of changes on these bells. I was even lucky enough to be able to sit down and interview 2 of the ringers at my church about the tower bell at St. James for this project.
Well, first of all, they have to control the bell, which means they have to get it to ring when they want it to ring in terms of time. So as we said before, they ring in a certain order. So you have to be able to change the time when your bell rings. And generally, the higher the bell goes in its swing, the longer it takes to do that. So if you want it to ring later in the order, then you have to endeavor to make it go up higher. And if you want it to ring faster, you have to make it not go up as high. So usually that entails either taking energy out of the bell or putting energy into the bell, depending on whether you want it to go faster or slower. So it requires certain mechanisms for handling characteristics to either change the amount of energy in the bell, and that's generally its potential energy, how high it actually rises up in its The bells in change ring full circle, meaning they go from the bell in a mouth up position, swinging around till it's in a mouth up position, but going in the other direction. Back and forth, kind of like a swing, except this would be if the swing actually went over the top to the, and it would be a rigid swing, if you like.
Well, the bells are in the tower for the purpose of calling people to worship, fundamentally. Secondarily, as a means of rejoicing, like for a wedding. We ring the bells for weddings. That's sort of very, very well known across civilization, pretty much. We also ring the bells for a funeral sometimes, or for other times of mourning, national mourning, local mourning. In order to achieve all, good ringing on these occasions, of course, we need to do a lot of practice. And I would hazard that one needs to do 3 to 4 times as much practice as you do, if you like, performing. So we do quite a lot of ringing during the space of a week or during the space of a month or whatever in practice, in order to be able to ring the bells with a pleasant or accepted sound for the Sunday service or the wedding or whatever we are doing it.
The church that I was attending at the time, which was St. Luke's downtown, was putting in a new installation. And the person who was organizing it asked me if I would give it a try. And so I said yes, and I enjoyed it a lot. I started in 2000, so that would be 17 years.
Okay. Well, I've been ringing for an unusually long period, and it is actually about just on coming up on 73 years. Because I started at a very young age. I started at the age of 10. This was in the middle or late middle of the Second World War. I lived in England at that time. Well, I was born in England. And the bells had been silenced or reserved for national warnings, like for invasion, for example, originally. And they were no longer needed for that, because we knew Herr Hitler couldn't make it across the channel now. We were safe. But most of the ringers at the church that I attended, which was St Dunstan in Canterbury, were in the war. They were off abroad. But we had 2 gentlemen who were ringers from well before the war, but they were too old to be called up, and so the church chose that they should find 6 youngsters out of the church choir, and we assembled 2 boys ages 10 and 16 and 4 girls in the intervening ages. We were like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we would go to choir practice, and immediately after choir practice we would go up to the tower and they would teach us how to ring. And the teachers, one of them was a gentleman in the choir. The other one was not a choir person. But they enthusiastically worked with us, and inside 6 months, I think we had this ringing thing pretty well mastered, that we were ringing for Sundays. I would say most of the young ringers who come to the tower to learn are attracted to it either by previous young ringers, a brother or sister maybe, who's already learned to ring, what attracts them, well, personally, well, let's speak for myself. I was co-opted, led by the ear, up to the tower, up the spiral stairs that we had up to the tower, and I was told, you're going to learn to ring. And it wasn't but a few pulls on the rope that I thought, oh, this is fun. And it still is fun. But to attract young people, it's never really a really good idea to actually recruit people, because with recruited ringers, like recruiting into a choir or whatever, the chances of them staying and becoming very accomplished are quite slim. Probably only about 1 in 3, whether they're adults or young ringers, will stay the course and keep on keeping on, because it does require hundreds to thousands of hours of practice and learning. What we try to do is to encourage our young ringers to study outside the tower, study at home, read their little book, which we give them at the start of ringing. Read it at home. Don't just think about ringing as soon as you step into the belfry, but be thinking about it. Certainly an equal amount of time outside the belfry. It's like anything, you need to study it.
Generally, you want to keep people feeling like they're challenged, like they've got something they want to try, and as long as they're making progress, it's possible to hold their attention, and that's true of younger ringers as well as older ringers. Generally, the younger they are when they start, we typically start sort of late elementary to early junior high. At that time, usually if kids starting out will make faster progress than adults, they seem to be able to pick it up more easily. And as long as they're making progress, you can hold their attention. So the challenge is to make sure that, and you have to encourage people. That's normal, because it does require practice to do. I don't really think it requires as much skill as a lot of things. Like it's not as hard as learning to play the piano or learning to play a violin, but it does require, one well-known ringer said, it's harder than learning to ride a bicycle, but it's easier than learning to play the violin. So I think that sort of gives you a general idea. And I think most people, if you can, if you're reasonably physically able to do it, and it doesn't really require that much strength, then I think most people can actually learn how to do it if they keep after it. It's really a question of how persistent you are and in keeping after it to see if you can develop the skills that you need. It's one of the things that's very interesting about it is it's very, very teamwork oriented. You have to work with the other, because each person is only ringing one bell. So in order to make it sound nice, all the people who are ringing together have to cooperate. They have to work with each other in a fairly precise manner. And that's one of the things that I find really interesting about it. It's very, very much a group activity and requires very close teamwork with the people that you're ringing with.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you have enjoyed it and that you have learned something new by watching it. I also hope that you have learned a little bit more about change ringing as well.